I want you to imagine this. Pause twos. You walk into a mansion with polished marble floors, high ceilings, and an indoor swimming pool shimmering under soft light. The forest outside stretches endlessly, quiet and peaceful. It feels like a dream home. But what if I told you, beneath those same floors, investigators uncovered more than 5,000 fragments of human bone? And what if I told you, the man who lived here threw parties with mannequins dressed in tuxedos while he lured young men into his pool and strangled them? This is not a movie. This is the real story of Fox Hollow Farm and the killer who turned his home into a graveyard. Herb Baumeister was, to everyone who knew him, a respectable man. Outgoing, high energy, a devoted father, a husband, a neighbor who loved hosting parties. People enjoyed being around him. He made them laugh. He brought the energy. But behind the smiling mask, Herb carried a darkness he could never escape. Diagnosed with schizophrenia when he was young, he grew obsessed with death, with the idea of control, with the power of taking life. Pause twos. For years, that obsession stayed hidden until it finally consumed him. Throughout the late 80s and 90s, dozens of young men went missing in Indiana. Friends searched, families grieved, but the cases went cold. Slowly, suspicion began to form around one man, Herb Baumeister. When the investigation came close, Herb didn't fight. He fled. And then, without a single confession, without admitting to a single murder, he killed himself. In his final note, he only mentioned a failing business and a broken marriage. Not a word about the lives he had destroyed. Not a number. Not a clue. When investigators searched his estate, Fox Hollow Farm, the horror revealed itself. Scattered across the property, buried shallowly, tossed carelessly, were fragments of human bone. Not a handful, not even dozens, over 5,000 pieces. They were able to identify some victims, but many remained nameless, reduced to bone and silence. Detectives believed there were still more, still hidden beneath the soil. The estate sat empty for years. It was gutted, remodeled, put back on the market. But no one wanted it. No one wanted to live where so many had died. Until 2006, when Rob and Vicki Graves and their 2 teenage sons wanted a quiet escape from city life. They wanted space, nature, somewhere peaceful. And then they found Fox Hollow Farm. At first glance, it was perfect. A sprawling mansion, acres of land, even that indoor pool. And the price? Unbelievably low. Too low. Rob and Vicki wondered why, until a memory struck Rob like lightning. He remembered the name. He stopped in the middle of the tour and asked the realtor, "Is this the home of Herb Baumeister?" The realtor hesitated, then admitted, "Yes, that's why it hadn't sold." Now imagine standing there, with your family, staring at a mansion that could be your dream home, but knowing it was once a serial killer's hunting ground. What would you do? Would you walk away, or would you take the chance? Rob and Vicki took it. They bought the property. They moved in. Almost immediately, the house began to reveal itself. One day, Vicki was vacuuming dirt near the pool. Suddenly, the vacuum cut off. She thought maybe she'd yanked the cord too hard. She plugged it back in, made sure it was secure. A moment later, it unplugged itself again. This time, when she turned, she saw the cord leap from the socket as though pulled by an unseen hand. She froze, heart racing. And then came Joe. He was one of Rob's employees, a young man who needed a place to stay. Rob and Vicki offered him the apartment above the garage. His first night there, Joe dreamed he was being chased. He shot up in bed, still half asleep, ran straight into a doorframe and cut his hands on shattered glass. When he finally woke, he realized he'd been running for his life in a dream, and the house had somehow followed him into it. Soon, both Vicki and Joe began to see him. A figure, a man in a bright red shirt, standing silently at the edge of the woods, staring at the house, and then vanishing. Vicki saw him first. Later, Joe saw him while walking his dog. His dog bolted after the man in red, dragging Joe forward. Joe followed, stumbling into the trees until suddenly, he was face to face with him. The man stood only feet away, silent, empty-eyed, his red shirt glowing in the dim light. Joe panicked, grabbed his dog, and ran. The next day, when Joe nervously told Rob and Vicki what he had seen, Vicki's face turned pale. She had seen the exact same man in the exact same spot. And then things escalated. Joe began hearing pounding on his apartment door late at night, aggressive, relentless knocking. When he flung the door open, no one. Once he saw the brass knocker held mid-air, as if someone invisible still gripped it. Then it slammed once more with a deafening crash. Another night, the doorknob twisted by itself. The lock gave way. The door burst open, and from the shadows, a man, dripping wet, screaming, sprinted past Joe and vanished into thin air. Imagine being there, alone, your dog growling at empty air, knowing something had just torn through your door. Would you stay? Joe did, for a while. But the house wasn't done with him. The three of them, Rob, Vicky, and Joe, began to research Baumeister's victims. They found old photos. And then Joe froze. One of the faces in those photos was the same man he had seen in his apartment, the man soaked and screaming, the one who had run past him into the dark. Days later, Joe discovered something in the woods, a human femur bone lying directly on a trail, too obvious to have been missed by investigators. He believed the spirits themselves had led him to it, forcing him to see what still lay beneath the earth. Detectives returned and explained the terrible truth. Most of Baumeister's victims had died in the swimming pool. He lured them there, promised a night of fun, then strangled them in the water. Around the pool, mannequins stood dressed in party clothes, silent witnesses to his crimes, a grotesque mocking party of the dead. And still, the haunting grew darker. One night, Joe found every knife from his butcher block removed and neatly arranged in the sink. Fresh gouges had been cut into the wooden counter. It was as if someone were reenacting a moment of violence. Joe turned on his phone recorder and asked the empty air, "Who is in the kitchen? Who keeps walking here?" At first, silence, then a whisper, distorted, chilling, impossible to mistake. The married one. Every victim had been single, young men, alone. The only married man tied to Fox Hollow Farm was Herb Baumeister himself. And that's when Joe realized it wasn't just the victims haunting this house. Herb Baumeister had never left. Fox Hollow Farm became more than a crime scene. It became a place where the dead still walked, where victims relived their final moments, and where the killer himself refused to leave. To this day, people report seeing shadowy figures in the woods, hearing pounding at doors, capturing voices on recordings. Some believe the spirits are the victims, trapped in the place where their lives were stolen. Others believe Herb himself lingers, feeding off the fear, enjoying the terror he still creates. Maybe it's both? So I have to ask you, would you step inside Fox Hollow Farm? Would you swim in that pool, knowing what happened there? Or would you feel the eyes of the man in red watching you from the trees? Pause twos. Because I know one thing. If walls could talk, Fox Hollow Farm would never stop screaming. And if you want to hear more stories like this, strange, dark, and mysterious, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Stay safe. And remember, some monsters never really leave.